Hello and welcome to Inside the Americas, coming up on today's program. After glitches and criticisms and a difficult uphill struggle, Barack Obama allows himself a note of triumphalism as Obamacare is launched with 7 million people already signed up. Brazil marks the 50th anniversary of a coup d'etat that plunged the country into 2 decades of military dictatorship. And the clock is ticking and the World Cup approaching, but will Brazil be ready? Now, it was, in the words of Barack Obama, a reform that was contentious, confusing, and obviously had its share of critics. But after all the debate, crunch time for Obamacare finally came. At midnight on March 31st, the obligatory new health insurance came into force. Its aim to cover over 40 million Americans. For now, though, 7 million have signed up, giving the American president a rare moment of triumph in his second term. This report from our New York correspondent, Jessica Le Masurier.
Brooklyn Flea Market, a favourite weekend hangout for bohemian New Yorkers, amongst them Tom Vogt, a film and documentary editor. Just like many other artists who don't have salaried jobs, Tom, who's in his late 40s, has always done without health insurance. That is, up until now. He's one of the 7 million Americans who've signed up for what's been dubbed Obamacare.
If I break my wrist, I can't work. Now, like having a sort of a prescribed safety net, I think is a little bit more peace of mind. Not sure about the bureaucracy of it all, but I feel like it's probably an overall good thing. Yeah.
Tom often works from home. He's a freelancer, and so he doesn't have an insurance program through his employer. Now, with Obamacare, which is obligatory for Americans who don't have another type of insurance, Tom will have to pay several $100s a month, but at least he'll be covered.
I didn't go to the doctor for 5 years.
Great. So come in here, have a seat with me.
Dr. Sanjay Sinha works in a clinic in Manhattan. In his mind, there's no doubt that Obamacare is a step forward.
I have more than one patient, I would say, who has uncontrolled diabetes, who as a result of the Affordable Care Act can now come see me, can now have covered preventive screenings for their eyes, for their feet, and other things that afflict kidney screening, that afflict diabetics in particular.
But the law has created problems for many people, including James Sobyan, who as a result of Obamacare had to change doctors because his former healthcare provider wouldn't accept his new insurance.
Such a mess. The fact that the site has been down, other sites are claiming to be Obamacare and people are getting information stolen. It's ridiculous. It's just a total flop.
Some Americans want to scrap the law. Others, including this group of young doctors, would like to see the reform go even further. Dr. Oliver Fine, the former president of Physicians for a National Health Programme, has invited them to a roundtable discussion in his office. They all agree that the current system is rotten.
I had an experience recently where a woman came into the emergency department and had appendicitis, and she didn't have insurance. And she said, how much is this operation going to cost? And we ended up having to tell her, this can kill you. You have to have surgery now, but we have no idea how much it's going to cost. We have no idea what you're going to have to pay. And yes, this could cause a financial disaster for your family, but you have to do it if you don't want to die. And that's horrific.
That's just the sort of problem that Dr. Fine dreams of fixing.
How could we solve these problems? And I think the way to do that is by implementing a Medicare for all type of program. The other name for that is what people call a single-payer program.
A national healthcare system for all is still far from becoming reality. For now, Americans will have to make do with the progress, albeit limited, that'll come with Obamacare.
We head now to Albuquerque, New Mexico, a city that's been shaken by protests against alleged police brutality. The city's police chief has gone so far as to announce reforms that will be made to the police. This after that protest turned violent, with people hunting down officers and throwing rocks and bottles. Well, the United States Justice Department has been investigating the Albuquerque department for more than a year now, looking into complaints of civil rights violations. Kyle G. Brown has more.
Protests denouncing police shootings in Albuquerque spiraled out of control last weekend as officers broke up crowds with tear gas.
Our emergency response teams were out there for the sole purpose of making sure that the protesters were safe and the general public was safe. The situation shifted. The situation shifted from protest to a mob.
The demonstrations were triggered by 2 recent police shootings of homeless people, one of which was captured by police cameras. James Boyd was mentally ill and, according to police, had a history of violence. In a standoff last month, he appeared to be surrendering when police officers opened fire, killing the 38-year-old homeless man. The FBI has opened a criminal inquiry into the case. And already underway is an investigation by the Federal Department of Justice into whether Albuquerque police has a pattern of using excessive force, in violation of the Constitution and federal law. The city mayor sought to reassure the public.
Are we investigating? Yes, we are. Are we investigating at unprecedented levels? Yes, we are. Are we working with the leadership within the department to look at potential changes to how we work on de-escalation techniques or other training? Absolutely.
Since 2010, Albuquerque police officers have been involved in at least 37 shootings, 2/3 of them fatal. A similar number of police shootings have occurred in other American cities, like Denver and Oakland, which are considerably larger than Albuquerque. Last week, the United Nations issued a report condemning the U.S. human rights record, criticizing police treatment of the poor and homeless in particular.
Now, it may have happened 50 years ago, but the military coup that plunged Brazil into dictatorship still has the power to raise passions, it seems. In the lower house of Congress this week, where a memorial session was being held to mark that 50th anniversary, a scuffle broke out when protesters for and against the dictatorship took each other on. Olivia Salazar has more.
A stroll through history at this museum in São Paulo. But for Ivan Seixas, the building holds dark memories. He spent 6 years incarcerated here as a political prisoner during the darkest period of the Brazilian 20th century.
The likelihood of being tortured was 100%. We knew we'd be tortured. The chance of dying was also very high. I was left on the parrot perch. That meant you were tied up and hanging upside down, and 2 machines gave you electric shocks simultaneously.
In March of 1964, President João Goulart was forced from power and the newly inaugurated capital of Brasilia was taken over by the army, ushering in 2 decades of dictatorship. While Brazil's junta years were not as bloody as in neighbouring countries, authorities estimate that some 500 people were killed or disappeared by the military. Groups of Marxist activists began to form in the major cities, resisting and undermining their military rulers. Thousands were imprisoned and tortured, among them a young Dilma Rousseff, who spent 3 years in jail.
We have learned the value of freedom by electing, for example, an exiled union leader who had been put in prison. He was jailed various times, and a woman who was also a prisoner. We took back our democracy in our own way, through struggle and irreversible human sacrifice.
The struggle for democracy was also judicial and legal. In 1988, 3 years after the fall of the regime, the current constitution was established. This document was the foundation for the social reforms of the Lula years. Building on the work of her predecessor, Dilma Rousseff established a truth commission to investigate human rights abuses under the dictatorship. The board has full access to government files, but can't prosecute any perpetrators of violence due to a 1979 amnesty law, which has since shielded all military officials from the courts. Despite calls for justice, no one has ever been convicted. Today, the army is still very present in Brazilian public life. Soldiers have been deployed to the country's favelas to maintain social order. It's also an effort to present the image of a nation poised and ready for the high-profile international events of the months and years to come.
Well, it is almost 2 months now till the World Cup kicks off there in Brazil. Some stadiums, however, are still in the process of being completed, causing more last-minute headaches for the football world's governing body, FIFA. Well, the focus of much of its concern, the stadium in Porto Alegre, It is due to host France's opening match against Honduras on June 15th. Our team travelled to the southern city to find out whether the construction would be done and whether the stadium would be ready.
Welcome to Porto Alegre's newly renovated Beira Rio Stadium. Capacity more than 50,000. It's here that France will make its 2014 World Cup debut. From the canopy's dizzy heights to the pitch below, the pressure is on to finally get the job done.
We are in the process of making the finishing touches in some areas that have to be cleaned and in the changing rooms. But one thing's for sure, when we hand over the keys to FIFA, the stadium will conform to all of the organisation's standards for holding matches, with no cause for concern.
If the stadium is almost ready, the same can't be said for its surroundings. This was the scene when we managed to film secretly under the stands. Finishing these areas in time for the tournament looks unlikely, a view shared by labourers.
There's a 90% chance we won't finish on time. When you go around this side, part of it's missing, and then there's another part here that should go around the stadium.
Football's governing body FIFA is monitoring progress in Porto Alegre with mounting concern, but insists no host city will be excluded from the tournament.
It's true that it's a big challenge, Porto Alegre. There's a lot of work to do. They have close to 140,000 square meters of pavement.
That's the equivalent of paving over 2 football fields. But for this sports journalist, it doesn't look good.
A lot of stadiums in Brazil will be finished on the inside, but will have problems on the outside. Only a few will be 100% complete with the necessary access and service areas. The rest will simply be window dressing.
Which is why FIFA is deploying a special task force there to oversee the final stages of construction.
Look there, those final preparations. Well, that brings us to the end of today's programme. We'll be back, though, next week with another look inside the Americas. For now, though, do stay with us here on France 24.